friends. I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hanselminutes. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brenda Darden Wilkerson. She's the president and CEO of AnitaB.org and a longtime advocate for tech equity and inclusive innovation. How are you?
I'm great, Scott, and I'm really honored to be here. And you? How are you today?
I'm doing all right. I am happy because I get to talk to cool people every week on the podcast, which has been my side hustle for a number of years. So I'm thrilled to be chatting with you today.
Thank you. I'm amazed at what you've done. So I'm glad to be part of it.
Well, I'm amazed at what you've done. Before Anita B, you kind of transformed Chicago Public Schools. You've got a background in computer science. You've been a computer scientist. Have you always been into tech? What was your first computer?
Oh, please. My first computer I saw when I got to college. That's an interesting story, right? Because, I got two educators for parents. And so, yeah, education, huge, huge, huge thing. But grew up in, and I always say this, we grew up in an all Black neighborhood. That doesn't mean we were poor. It just meant it was all Black. But policy, as it continues now, decides who gets what type of curriculum. And so computer science was not in my high school. So though I graduated, had to be a good student to live in my parents' house, right? I had never studied computer science until I got to college.
Really?
That's right. And it was accidental. And it was also an accident.
So you just fell into computers?
Sort of. So I was pre-med. And at my university, pre-med was pick a major that filled all of the prerequisites, right? And so I picked biomedical engineering, and it had two programming classes. Voila, I'm exposed.
Isn't that funny? I love that you used exposed because it is that access and that moment of exposure.
Totally.
My first computer, I was 12. It was a Commodore 64, and then it was an Apple II. And somebody said, "Hey, what's that?" And then we like, "Oh, look at this!"
Right?
You play whatever Tetris or whatever game. Like, oh, you know what it was? They had a little robot with a Sharpie and a giant piece of butcher paper and a big long ribbon cable, and we were making spirographs. And
I remember that.
Around, right?
I remember that.
And they had to bus us. They had to bus us to another school because that was the only school that had that computer and had that little robot. This is a time when we didn't have pocket supercomputers.
Right.
I
remember the 2E. Now, we won't talk about the difference in age. We just will not.
I think we may be contemporaries.
I just don't want to talk about it. But I remember my sister's son. She had a son and a daughter, and the 2E went in this boys' room. And again, that was some of the same sort of exposure situation that when I got to college, most of the boys had access to the computer, the technology, and not so much the girls. And so, that created some of the, that was a pin drop for me that would come back around as I got into my career and found my passion for building computer science in Chicago Public Schools.
I want to go back to that for a second, though. They consciously said, we're going to install the computer in the boys' room.
They did. They and my, very educated parents, my brother-in-law is an engineer. My sister's a lawyer. They on purpose bought this computer for a 3-year-old. He was kind of upset because he was like, where are the other toys? And of course, back in that day, that was like buying a small car, And so, but yeah, he got the computer. And let me tell you, my history with computer science education bears this out, that the assumption was that in those times that it was something for the boys, not so much for the girls.
I had jury duty yesterday. And before the jury duty, they make you watch a video on unconscious bias.
Ooh.
And it opens up, and it was a Black woman judge, and she had a short TWA, very tight curls. She gave her speech, and then they stopped it, and then a white lady judge came in and said, "You may have thought this," and she put up a list of all the things that we may have thought about this judge: competent, intelligent, educated. Or you may have thought assertive, intense, aggressive, or whatever. And then we had a whole conversation about unconscious bias. Even though your parents wanted the best for the boys and for you, it was unconscious bias that caused them to just install the computer in the boys' room. It wasn't malice.
I don't know if I think I would give it a different name. I'm not sure if it's a name that is something that's stated. I think
Mm.
they followed the crowd, right? So
Oh, there you
the
go.
images, it's sort of like what you in your training, the images of who can, right? So if the image of who can, like what was the name of that show, Silicon Valley?
Hmm.
It was four dudes, right?
Yep.
Or no women. If you look at the movie that supposedly followed what's the Apple founder's life, they purposely removed, or they had a woman in the movie, I'm told, who was there to iron his pants. She was one of the major software engineers, but they chose to have her show up as somebody who was ironing his trousers, right? So it's part of that. If you believe, if you don't take the time to do the research to say what is reality, then you would never know about people like all the women who were part of the ENIAC group, who actually helped save 11 million lives during World War II. And when those pictures finally showed up in the 80s, they thought, oh, those were models who were just modeling, being in front of a computer. If you don't know, then
Yeah.
you go with the images that you're presented with, right? And so I think my sister and brother-in-law were concerned. They thought, oh, it's a boy thing, right? Because that's what we're told. That's what their counselors were told them, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's part of the myth we have to dispel.
Yeah, that was the 2015 Steve Jobs movie, and that was Kate Winslet ironing his shirt before a presentation. Yeah. I like that. You're right. It's different than unconscious bias. It's inertia. It's momentum in a certain
Right.
direction, and there's just no reason for it
Right.
other than direct. It's just that's the direction that people headed, and the idea that you saw a different path is so important. For me, it wasn't about being a boy or a girl. It was about the accessibility of the money. Like
Right.
it was like computers were thousands of dollars. There's just
Right.
no way. Like rich people have computers and I
Right.
don't have computers. And the school had one computer, not one per
Right.
kid, not one per
Right.
classroom, one. And we had
Well,
to like check it out.
that's the story that I heard about Bill Gates, who's always sold as this really exceptional. Not that he isn't. He's an exceptional human being. He's smart. He's successful. But he was statistically, it was statistically significant that he ended up doing what he did because he happened to live in the community that had one school in which someone decided to invest that major computer purchase, and he just happened to be chosen to be in a small group of people who got to try that thing out after school or in something like that, if I'm getting it right. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't that, okay, I'm smart like that. It was access and exposure
Yeah.
that was really kind of narrow.
Yeah.
And
And
unfortunately, that's at a pattern of narrow, right?
exactly. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's not a dig on Bill Gates or
Right.
anybody
Right.
because it's a formula and it's a formula for luck.
Right.
And luck is being prepared plus opportunity.
Right.
And because of the luck of my birth, I was prepared. But when the opportunity to have a computer was presented to me, luck was invented. So I
Right.
look at it as how can I create luck for other people?
Love it.
And you got to do that by making opportunity. But there's also the tenaciousness. There are people out there who are so tenacious that they're going to create their own luck. Many years ago, true story, I interviewed on this podcast. I'll have to find the episode. A gentleman named Elvis Chidera, who was a Java programmer, and he did all of his Java programming in Nigeria on a 9-key phone. He didn't have a keyboard.
Oh my
He would
God.
just go. Remember, you have to hit like
Oh
each
my
button
God.
3
I
times.
remember that.
I was in Europe and he got out of Nigeria. He got an expert visa, went to work as a software engineer. I met him 10 years later and he just needed to be a
Yeah.
maker,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Imagine what would have happened if he had a proper computer 10 years ago
Exactly.
and how far ahead that he would
Exactly.
be.
And the
And
impact he would have had on all of us, right? So many times the conversation is around what happens to that person.
mhm,
And I want to say, yes, what happens to that person's family, community, and all the rest of us who get the benefit of that person's contributions because they got access.
there's a ripple effect,
It is.
100%. So we need to get not just computers in front of people, but opportunities, apprenticeships, build pipelines,
Right.
and also acknowledge, I think it's fair to say that not every tech job is a coding job. Like, I think that's
Correct.
also a thing. There's just
More and
general
more.
tech literacy.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, in this age of AI, I feel like people are cheapening the value of knowledge. And I'm curious how Anita B and your team are going to think about that, because like knowing how stuff works is important.
It's
You're
incredibly
reeling.
important.
People who can't see you, you're reeling from that
I
question, which
am.
means either it's a good question or a bad question. So I'm interested in your perspective.
It's an excellent question. So, one of the things that I value about my upbringing is that my parents taught me how to think. They
Hmm.
would not allow me to be mentally lazy. I remember my father would say, if I said something dumb, he would say, "You ought to use your head for more than a hat rack." And that
I think we had the same parents.
right? And I mean, and that would just like shock me out of, oh my God, he thinks I'm I'm dumb or something. So what worries me about AI is that it's being used as a replacement for human creativity. It should be used as an assistant, a tool that you can use by choice, not be forced to use.
Hmm.
It's like having a tool belt. It should have more in it than just a hammer.
Mhm.
And so, yes, at anitaB.org, what we like to do is talk about the intersection of knowledge, right? So, when I earned my CS degree, it was very much focused on CS. What like to see is for people in the arts to use their skill and their particular perspective with tech to invent something that only they would really understand how to invent that's impactful on the arts. Not someone, well, I mean, I'm artsy, but it's not someone who's not, who's nerdy, saying, I think this is what you need. In the same way, someone who is, has a medical background, has some medical training to come in with some technical skills and design something that's useful for med tech versus somebody who's like, I think this should work for you here. Will it work? Maybe in some circumstances, but wouldn't the likelihood of the success of that product actually serving a segment of the population increase if you were to have a cross section of knowledge, not just those of us who understand how to speak with a computer. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking, is with AI. Yes, AI is creating code so that you don't have to know how to code, so that in order to create, say, a program that does something. But the AI is not perfect, and I don't know that it ever will be. And so the knowledge of what is actually supposed to happen would help that code actually end up being something useful because that person with the knowledge could come in and make it so.
Yeah, yeah. I want to yes and everything that you said, and also offer the perspective that in the current system that we have at this place where we are in capitalism in the Northern Hemisphere, value and one's internal value seems to be measured based on their ability to produce,
Right.
but not their inherent value in who they are and what they know and the context in which they come from. And now, if AI says, well, all that stuff that you were going to go to school for 4 years and
Right.
know, I already know that, people feel their own
Right.
inherent value being cheapened.
Right.
While what their real value is who they are, where they came from, their context, their knowledge, their background, because that's the thing that provides them the context to use the AI to build solutions. So
Correct.
to your example, if someone has an example, a place that they grew up and there's a medical problem, they want to support people in a certain way, they don't want the solution pushed at them from outside forces.
Right.
They want to pull in that
Exactly.
solution, make that solution with the context that they have. And we need to remind people that in college, that their
Mhm.
value is their upbringing, their experience, their community, their families. And I think that we need to make sure that we're putting together curricula that doesn't take that away from them.
I totally agree. And I think that is the inherent creativity that we come into the world with. I think I'm really bad with names. I think it's Sir Kenneth someone. He recently passed away, but he did a TED talk that talked about how the creativity that we come into the world with, many times our educational institution can take it away from them
Sir
because
Ken Robinson,
Sir
indeed.
Ken Robinson, love him. And I think that was one of the things that I was trying to do with CS for All in Chicago Public Schools was to grab kids before they were many times socialized out of what they brought into the world naturally. Like, for instance, many times people will say, and I had this experience when I was an adjunct at a community college, the women who I would have in my classes would say they would always harken back, or all of my students, all of my grown students would do this to what some teacher had told them they weren't good at. Well, Mr. Smith says I'm not good at math. Well, we actually know girls are better at math early. It takes them a while to get socialized out of it before like graduation. All of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't like math. Well, they've been told that. It wasn't that they were inherently bad at math. And so where our opportunity was to say, let me get you before you have been told you're not good at this and give you the tool and the access and
Mm.
let you see what you can do based upon your background, your wishes, desires. What? You're a ballet dancer? There might be something that you would bring uniquely to computer science that somebody who plays soccer wouldn't, but both are valid.
Yeah, and like if you use the ballet dancer thing as an example, currently the way that we think as a society, at least in this hemisphere, is that like, oh, well, those two things are not compatible. Therefore, there are no ballet dancers who are also computer scientists.
Right.
And they're not going to solve ballet problems with computer vision,
Right.
when clearly that's a problem that should be explored. But
Absolutely.
I do think that we're at an opportunity here, though, because the young people, you know how they always say the kids are going to be okay? The young people are exploring spaces in ways that we didn't. I'll give you an example, and let me know what you think. I have a 17-year-old. He's a varsity football. I don't know anything about football, but I try to be a good dad, so now I know everything about football. Right? I'm there. I got the gimbal and I'm doing video of my son. I got the whole thing. Like I'm a football dad. And I'm like, I guess I ended up with a bro for a kid because every kid's different. I got one kid who watches anime. I got one who's a bro. And he says, I want these pants, Dad. They're like $400 Japanese denim jeans. And I said, good luck with that. And he's like, well, I could probably just make them. And I was like, I mean, yeah. How can I support you? He says, does Nana have a sewing machine? Okay, let's do it. Go to get Nana's sewing machine. He buys a bolt of denim. He gets the other bros to come over. So I have a house full of football men, big, thick neck, like hack squat,
Yes.
young men. Bro, those jeans are sick, bro. And they broed up a pair of denim jeans in about 2
Wow.
weeks. And what's so cool about that is that in the 80s, there would have been a
Right.
whole Karate Kid movie about the football player who getting teased for making jeans and he wants to be a
Right.
fashion kid. And what's great about it is that he's still a bro,
Yep.
but now he's a bro with really nice looking jeans that he made
Right.
himself
That he made himself.
without thinking about that.
I love that story. And it's part of what I think needs to be like a rule that gets stated often. More than one thing can be true at one time,
Are we
right?
in a society where two things cannot be true anymore? Is that where we're
I don't know.
at?
I mean, somewhere I felt maybe that was happening. I don't know. Right? So he could be a football bro.
Yes.
He could go get Nana's sewing machine, which is a lost art. I really, it's a fact that that's coming back at all for
Oh,
folks.
and you know what's doing it? It's TikTok. I
Mm.
I initially was like, TikTok's going to rot your brain, and it will at some point. But the amount of little snackable knowledge, he's
Mhm.
like, man, these pockets are killing me. Man, these buttons are killing me. And he would get angry, go for a walk, come back, and he says, oh, I found this other dude on TikTok that knew how to do buttons, and I came back with a new perspective.
Wow.
And I was like, you should read the manual. He's like,
All
no, I
right.
don't know. Read the manual. There's a YouTuber that does that, right? He could have Twitch streamed the whole thing. And I just think that that's the kind of attitude that we need. But at the same time, if a young woman were to Twitch stream her live coding, unfortunately, some bros are going to come in and probably give her a hard time.
Mhm.
And that's something we need to work on as well. I read an interesting article you probably saw a couple of weeks ago about cringe culture and how people don't want to be cringe. Everyone's afraid
Right.
to be themselves because they're afraid a camera will be pointed at them.
Right. I mean, and think about it. When we were coming along, some of the dumb stuff that I thought of or did, I'm glad no one had a camera to point at me. There's no history, right? And so it does put a different amount of pressure on young people, their ability to really be themselves and to really investigate and try out things that help them figure out who they want to be. I mean, as I shared, I had never even, I mean, I think I had access to a computer for, I know, not for learning purposes at all before I got to college. But just think about what could have been different for me and how different my life did turn out when I did get access, right? My whole career, even though, I left software engineering at that ripe old age of 35, that unfortunately is still the average for women
Mm.
to leave tech. Then I went into education, but I've stayed around technology, and it was all about that one opportunity to have access.
Hey, friends, it's an advertising break. We're going to take a moment and chat with our new sponsor, ShareGate by WorkLeap. If you're thinking about deploying Copilot in an organization, but you've got a whole bunch of documents and a whole bunch of information, that can be a new challenge. Shaylin Gimby, what makes it so challenging for IT teams?
Copilot is an incredible tool, but only if your Microsoft 365 environment is clean, secure, and structured. If your permissions are a mess or your teams are inactive and your SharePoint sites are unstructured, you're basically setting Copilot up to pull the wrong data for the wrong people. And Copilot only works effectively if everything is in one tenant. So if your data is scattered across multiple tenants, Copilot's ability to retrieve and process information is going to be seriously limited. That's why data consolidation should be a top priority in your Copilot readiness plan. You hear the saying, garbage in, garbage out. An outdated file from 8 years ago with more views might take priority over a newer, more accurate file with fewer views, leading to unreliable answers. Without cleaning up your content and structuring your data properly, you could end up with Copilot generating responses based on outdated or irrelevant files, which is exactly why we built our Copilot readiness assessment. It analyzes your tenant and gives IT teams clear insights and recommendations so they can get their environment in shape before rolling out Copilot. That way, you're not just flipping a switch and hoping for the best.
Now we're cooking with gas. This is great. Now I know how ShareGate by WorkLeap is going to help me out. It is packed with best practices, going to guide you at every step. It's your out-of-the-box Microsoft 365 migration tool. Check it out at sharegate.com. And thank you for being a sponsor of Hanselminutes. So speaking of access, as well as seeing oneself in this space, at the Grace Hopper celebration, have you seen people go to an event of technologists and go just be overwhelmed? Like, wait a second, I'm in an all-women tech event or
Yeah.
primarily women tech event. And does that brighten
Yeah.
them? Does it calm them? Does it keep them from quitting tech?
So that is an excellent question. And let me try to answer it. First of all, it is the most myth-busting experience that one might ever experience, regardless of your gender.
Hmm.
Because if your expectation, if you've been watching TV and you think that it's only the bros that do tech, and you show up and there are all these brilliant women from around the world. We've had as many as 155 countries represented at Grace Hopper celebration. And what's so striking, not only is the numbers, you're just standing there looking around going, I thought there weren't any, because you'll hear that. Why didn't you hire any women? Well, I couldn't find any. Well, there's 30,000 of them right here. You should show up over here. And so that already is this like physical experience of busting the lie. But it works for both women and men, because for me, I heard there weren't that many. And I had been in a situation where I was always in the minority. There was one woman, I was it, or there were few women and I was one of the few. But for the men as well, they're looking around like, wait, what is happening? And because it's 3 or 4 day experience, the women take such great opportunity to talk about everything that they're doing every moment in the elevator, sitting at lunch. I mean, it's just all this rich conversation. And I remember there was one gentleman who had just recently joined my board who was at the conference, and he said to me, he said, Brenda, I got on the hotel at 27. By the time I got to 2, I had heard 3 pitches of women talking to each other, talking about what they were doing. I was like, yeah, we don't mess around, dude. So it's a situation where people are encouraged to think about their possibilities because they see the possibility.
Mm. I can see where showing up and being the only is something that one can intellectualize, but when one feels it viscerally, it
Yes.
changes their perspective.
Yeah.
My wife is from Zimbabwe. We've been married 25 years this year. And
Congratulations.
thank you. When I'm standing like on the street in like downtown Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, every once in a while I'll be like, oh crap, there's not a white dude within a couple 100 miles of here.
Yeah.
And it's like, that must be what it feels like to hang around in Portland, and it's such an obvious statement. It's such an obvious statement. Oh yeah, I totally, it must be hard. I can totally understand what you feel. But then you feel it and you're like, oh,
Oh,
damn.
it's from the intellectual to the actual, right?
Mm.
And so that to me has been one of the benefits for many of the gentlemen that show up at the conference because there's always men there. In fact, the first time I even learned of what the Grace Hopper celebration was from a couple of my teachers when I was at the district who came to me, male teachers, and said, "Can you pay for me to go to this conference?" And I was like, "Well, what is it?" And they're describing it and all these flowery terms. And I remember saying, well, why are you interested in going to that? And they talked about how much they recognized, they were able to place themselves in the literal myth of what it takes to be a computer scientist and who should. And they were able to come back and look at their classrooms and understood that it wasn't that the women weren't interested, is that they didn't feel welcome because of how what lopsided the room had been set up. It was only focused on the interests of young men, not on women as well. And so they learned from physically being in that space.
Yeah. And people who might disagree and think that this is a political statement or a left versus right issue, but they maybe made it 25 minutes into this podcast, I would encourage them to think about it in a way that fits their environment. Now, I'm a middle-aged white guy from the West Coast, but I'm the first one in my family to go to college, and I was an adjunct at community college, and I graduated from community college. Even now, 32 years into my career as a software engineer and working as a vice president at Microsoft, I'll meet a young person who went to MIT, who went to Yale, and I will be intimidated because that's not my people. I did not grow up like that, and I will feel that. The difference is that they can't look at me and tell, so they can't see that I feel that way. But I try to keep that sense of empathy and wonder, but also appreciation that I kind of made it out. But also, like, that's my thing to carry. But imagine if I had a shirt that said, I went to community college on the outside, and like everyone could tell. I would enter meetings and they go, here comes community college guy. That would change how I was perceived. And that's how I kind of remind folks is that my difference is internal and others might be externalized.
I like that a lot.
Important to remember.
I like that a lot because it comes with a lot more baggage. There's this proving of oneself over and over again. And I think that, again, is one of the things that makes the conference special for women of all ages. People think it's just young women, but we cover people from college all the way up to the boardroom. Is that I know that no one here is going to look at me and go, you don't belong. Why are you here? And it counts a lot. It's less baggage, but it's a wonderful celebration for everyone who comes because we all learn that we can contribute to this thing called tech, that there's a segment of the population that we are uniquely able to contribute to, and we need everyone's contributions.
So the Grace Hopper celebration this year is November 4th through the 7th in Chicago.
That's right.
And there's also in India, South Asia, which is going to be probably the biggest presentation of women in that space. That's in December this year. So depending on where you are in the world, there's a Grace Hopper celebration near you.
That's right. There is a Grace Hopper celebration for you. And so the one in India is going to be in Bangalore. It is the largest celebration for women in tech in Asia.
Wow.
And it is very exciting. We also have 50 separate communities around the world on just about every continent where communities get together physically, or they can meet together on our membership platform that is international as well. And so I believe collaboration is the thing that drives innovation. And you get to collaborate when you get access to each other. And so not only these, once a year events are fantastic, like it's a huge opportunity, but month by month, week by week, our membership platform offers the same opportunity. Many times people will meet in person and then they'll continue to connect, even though they're on opposite sides of the world, on our membership platform.
That is so important also, like just having a network,
Yes.
So we've got November 4th in Chicago. We've got December 2nd to the 4th in Bangalore.
That's right.
Grace Hopper Celebration India. And then there's online all the time community. And it is an opportunity for women to get together. Should I join, though? Am I not supposed to be in that space? And if I do join that space, how do I interact in that space?
Oh, absolutely. There are all genders on our membership platform. We do not restrict it. We have conversations that happen weekly on a myriad of topics. One of the things that I always share is the highest and best use of tech is at service of people. And so a lot of what we talk about on the platform is about people. What are the things that you need to be successful as a human being and as a technologist? So we'll talk about financial health. We'll talk about mental health. But of course, we talk about all the nerdy stuff because it's where all the nerds hang out. So, if you're willing to be in a nerdy conversation, then, come on over.
That is absolutely kind of nerdy conversation that I like. And I appreciate you hanging out with me for 30 minutes, having a nerdy conversation. I feel like we could go another 30 very easily.
We could. Thank you so much, Scott. This has been so wonderful.
Thank you. We've been chatting with Brenda Darden Wilkerson, President and CEO of AnitaB.org. You can check them out at AnitaB.org, and the Grace Hopper celebration is GHC.AnitaB.org. This has been another episode of Hanselminutes, and we'll see you again next week.